Welcome everyone to Things Around 8. Dear friends, in this video we will talk about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump and how the Secret Service failed miserably in its mission. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bells so you don't miss any news. This Saturday, July 13th, former President and presidential candidate Donald Trump took the stage in the city of Butler, Pennsylvania, at exactly 6:03 p.m. local time, with his rally being abruptly interrupted at 6:11 p.m. by intense gunfire. According to the available footage, during the rally, Trump makes a slight turn of his head, and a fraction of a second later, we hear the first shot, with Trump touching his right ear and throwing himself to the ground. At this moment, with gunshots being heard from all sides, we see Secret Service agents protecting Trump, who with a clearly visible wound to his right ear, is removed from the stage by security guards and taken to a local hospital. According to his campaign committee, the injuries were minor, but from the images, it is quite clear that if Trump had not made that slight movement of his head, the shot would have hit his skull and he would most likely have died right there, at that location. According to the information available, the shooter and a Trump supporter who was in the audience died in the exchange of gunfire, with another person being injured. There is still much speculation about the real motives behind the attack, but with American society so divided, politics is seen as the most likely motive. A map analysis of the shooting site indicates that the shooter managed to climb onto the roof of a warehouse just 150 meters from the platform, firing several shots before being finally neutralized, raising a very important question. How did the United States Secret Service, with a very strong security apparatus set up on site, fail in its mission to protect former President and candidate Donald Trump? The United States Secret Service was created in 1865 with a very specific mission, to combat counterfeiting after the American Civil War, and they only began to protect presidents in 1901, after the assassination of President William McKinley in Buffalo, New York. In addition to the president, the Secret Services also began to protect his spouse and immediate family members, such as children, grandchildren, grandparents and parents. But it was only after 1964 that the Secret Services also began to protect former presidents, their spouses and children up to the age of 16. This protection was originally for life, reduced to just 10 years in 1994, and returned to life in 2012. The Secret Services also protect the main presidential candidates, which means that Donald Trump has a double right to be protected, since in addition to being a former president, he is also a presidential candidate. But even so, he was almost killed during a rally, and the blame for this is not, at least not entirely, on the Secret Services. The Secret Service's presidential protection work is coordinated with local police forces and other federal security services, which together establish what is called a multi-layered security perimeter, with the Secret Service being responsible for two layers, the main one being the personal protection of the president, former president, or candidate. That is why whenever we see Trump and Biden on the streets, there are usually men and women dressed in black, wearing traditional sunglasses and headphones, through which they receive and transmit information about what they are seeing, discreetly alongside them. When something happens, they are the ones who intervene directly, immobilizing nearby attackers and blocking any threat with their own bodies. But the Secret Service is also responsible for the outermost layer, acting against snipers and long-range threats, such as missiles and drones. And that is why there are usually teams of observers and snipers on top of buildings, and helicopters flying over the areas where they operate. However, in the intermediate layer of protection, the direct responsibility lies with local security forces, who ensure that no one enters the immediate security perimeter armed or carrying explosives, as well as ensuring traffic control and preventing blockages and crowding along the planned traffic routes of the motorcade. It is also the responsibility of local forces to ensure that no one armed comes within reasonable shooting distance, which is exactly what happened on July 13th, when the shooter managed to position himself on top of a warehouse just 150 meters from Donald Trump. The local security forces, namely the Butler County Police in Pennsylvania, were directly responsible for the control and security of that specific area. These local forces communicated with the Secret Services through special channels. According to the information available to date, people who were close to the location saw an armed man climbing onto the roof, and the local police were alerted. This means that, most likely, the Secret Services were informed of the presence. However, since the shooter acted very quickly, there was probably no time for this information to be passed on to the operatives on the ground. Therefore, from what can be assessed at this time, there was a serious failure of local security, with the Pennsylvania police failing to adequately protect an area marked as potentially sensitive. If there had been 1 or 2 officers patrolling the area, the shooter would have been spotted before he had time to climb onto the roof and open fire. But the Secret Services also failed, because it was their fault for not establishing a fast, agile and unimpeded channel of communication with the local forces. In one of the videos of the shooting, we can see how this multi-layered defense works. When the shots start, the Secret Service snipers, positioned on the roof of a warehouse just behind Trump's platform, are seen observing the horizon, probably worried about tall buildings a few hundred meters away. That is why, a fraction of a second before the first shot, we can see them repositioning themselves, lowering their sights and focusing on the warehouse just 150 meters away. This seems to indicate that the shooter was spotted 1 or 2 seconds before firing, forcing the Secret Service snipers to change their focus, going from hundreds of meters to just 150 meters in half a second. This sniper, consciously or unconsciously, managed to exploit the greatest vulnerability in the Secret Service security scheme, which is the aforementioned intermediate layer of protection. This security scheme will certainly be reevaluated and rewritten to prevent attacks of this type from happening again in the future. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bells so you don't miss any news.